Okay, we'll start with this. An update in regards to Alicia Baumgardner's next fight date. You know, initially, she was supposed to be facing Jessica Gonzalez on February the 28th. But since then, the fight date has been pushed back to later on this month.
On the 20th.
It's the same opponent, so my sentiments haven't changed. Alicia Baumgardner should make her way past Jessica and make her way past her comfortably.
Yeah, she should.
Another highly touted super featherweight prospect is going to be in action the following week. Tiara Brown, who I like to describe as the super featherweight division's best kept secret. Understand that when it comes to both of these fighters, the talent is there, the ability is there, even if the promotion is not. Neither Alicia or Tiara have big promotional contracts with big promotional outfits like Golden Boy, like Top Rank, like Matchroom, like Queensberry, like Starlin Promotions. You know,
Comes to Alicia and Tiara.
both of their careers are managed by smaller outfits. Thus, they don't get the same exposure that some other fighters get. But rest assured that the talent, the ability is there. And it is for this reason that I am tracking both of their careers very closely, as they are the dark horses of the super featherweight division. The super featherweight division where Terry Harper is a champion, Hyun-Mi Choi is a champion, Maiva Hamadouche is a champion, and Eva Brotnica is a champion. This is a division that has no shortage of talented fighters, be they champions or challengers. But there's special significance when it comes to these two because they have all the makings of what could be champions, even in the absence of a big-time promoter. So if one of these champions should one day find themselves so confronted with either Tiara Brown or Alicia Baumgardner, they may be in for a long night, because the longer it takes the cream of the crop to deal with these two fighters, the more difficult they could become to deal with as a result. I think that the current WBO 140-pound champion, Christina Leonardo II, had the right idea when she squared off against Alicia several fights ago.
In 2018.
That time, Christina had a professional record of 9 wins and only 1 loss. That loss coming at the hands of Delphine Persoon when Christina challenged her for the WBC title. Christina and Alicia were in very similar places in their career, and that was the most opportune time to take her on, as you don't want to wait around for Alicia to gain the same as or more professional experience than you, because if you do, she's just going to become that much harder to deal with over time. That applies to Alicia, and that applies to Tiara, who appears to be in possession of a version of the super featherweight WBO title, which could line her up for Eva Brotnica, the full-fledged WBO champion at the weight. The basic idea here is that both Tiara and Alicia are going through the motions, amassing professional experience and rounding out as fighters. And the longer they are allowed to do this,
Well,
the more of a problem they become for everyone and anyone at weight. When you've got a problem, you deal with it. You don't ignore it, because the more you ignore it, the bigger the problem becomes. And Tiara and Alicia could become a big problem for the who's who at 130 pounds. They're going to be in action very soon, and I would advise the cream of the crop in the super featherweight division to take notice of both of these fighters, as sooner or later, someone is going to have to deal with them. In our light heavyweight, or should I say cruiserweight news, Sergey Kovalev's upcoming fight with Sullivan Barrera was made official. Looks to be a pretty good card, all things considered.
it's a good card.
I'd have to say that the best fight on the entire card, better even than the main event, is the Teixeira versus Castaño card. You know, when I first heard that these guys were going to be locking horns, I kind of figured that maybe it would land on either Showtime or Fox. Brian Castaño having participated in, PBC cards. I mean, that's where he's been fighting. And I kind of figured that the Teixeira fight would end up over there. But as it turns out, it's going to be part of a Golden Boy card on DAZN. No complaints from me. I was going to watch the fucking thing regardless of where it landed, because I think it's that good a fight between two very aggressive punchers. And in reality, it's anybody's fight.
It is.
Of course, when you got two very aggressive punchers that like to come forward, like to mix it up, well, that creates an avenue of opportunity for both guys. It's got the look of a big train, little train situation because Teixeira is the more statuesque fighter of the two fighters in the fight. But I would argue that Brian Castaño has the better boxing acumen, and that might make all the difference for him, knowing when to engage and when to disengage, work around the bigger guy. It's a sensational fight. I think it's better even than the main event. You know, this for Sergey, as it turns out, is a one-off. Sergey has since decided against a permanent move to the cruiserweight division. Rightfully so, of course. I don't know what the fuck he'd be looking for at cruiserweight. What would he be looking for?
Looking to go to the hospital.
And I'm not talking about this fight in particular, you understand. It's conceivable that Sergey might make his way past Sullivan Barrera. He just might. But beyond that...
Afterwards.
What then?
What?
What, you're gonna tell me you give Sergey good odds against the Yuri Kalenga when Sergey just got knocked out by a middleweight?
Huh?
What, you're gonna tell me you give Sergey good odds against a Lawrence Okoli, a Junior Dorticos, a Maris Bradis, a Christoph Glowacki,
No way.
a Pfeiffer, a Makabu?
No way.
When we just saw Sergey Kovalev get starched by a shorter, stumpier fighter who's better suited to fight at 160 as opposed to 175? Ultimately, Sergey and his team, they really did make the right decision doubling back on that proposed move to the cruiserweight division because Sergey is no more cut out to be a cruiserweight than, say, Jorge Linares was cut out to be a junior welterweight. Remember what happened to him when he went up there? Oh, granted, Linares was an elite level guy, a 3-division champion in the lightweight division. But at super lightweight, 140 pounds, he found out real quick by fighting a journeyman that he don't belong up there. And the exact same thing could have happened to Sergey had he decided to stick to his guns and stick with going to cruiserweight. Bad idea. So this Barrera fight, it is going to be above the light heavyweight limit, but it's a one-off. Sergey Kovalev reportedly will be returning to the light heavyweight division thereafter, provided he makes his way past Sullivan Barrera. And it's not a foregone conclusion that he does. I mean, these are two guys, both of them, whose careers are winding down. One guy's 37 and one guy's 38. Both have had their share of losses, both have had ups, they've had downs. I would say that Sergey is the favorite, but it's boxing and anything can happen. The best fight on this card, in all honesty, really is Teixeira versus Castaño. So even if you're not intrigued, even if you're not all that interested in seeing Sergey Kovalev versus Sullivan Barrera, you can tune in for that because Teixeira versus Castaño promises to be a real firefight, and anything can happen. Perhaps Castaño does have the better boxing acumen, but you know what? So did Carlos Adames, and we see how things worked out for him.
Yeah.
And Brian Castaño actually is a smaller guy than Carlos Adames. So is it possible he takes a better punch or doesn't take a better punch than a Carlos Adames? I don't know. We'll see on April 25th. We'll see. Keep your eyes peeled for this. Welterweight news. A stunning turn of events from one Bob Arum. The same Bob Arum who was averse to staging a fight between Mikey Garcia and Josh Taylor due to the finances, he now seems open to a fight between that same Mikey Garcia and Terrence Crawford. This might leave one feeling so inclined to ask why that is. Why do you feel one way about Mikey fighting Josh, given Mikey's financial demands? Why do you feel one way about Mikey fighting Josh, and another way about Mikey fighting Crawford?
What's the difference?
You know, and Bob basically said that, he doesn't know why Mikey feels they have differences.
Yeah, right.
And if that's something that he wants to explore, he's got to call them. He's got to talk to them. Because apparently they'd be willing to make a fight.
The fuck?
Oh, I know it might seem like a contradiction on the surface. I mean, how are Mikey's demands unreasonable for a Josh Taylor, but they're not unreasonable for a Terrence Crawford?
Huh?
I mean, what's going on here? It's not as hard to wrap your mind around this one as it appears on the surface. You see, the kind of money that Mikey's looking for would require them to stage a fight with him and someone else as a pay-per-view, and therein lies a dilemma. You can't have Mikey Garcia and Josh Taylor as a pay-per-view geared towards Americans. The Americans don't know Josh, but the Americans do know Terrence.
They do.
And while Terrence's last 2 pay-per-view outings were fairly lackluster, a fight with a Mikey Garcia, even on pay-per-view, could yield a much better result than what we've seen so far, because not only are the Americans familiar with Mikey, but they are familiar with Terrence, and if you put those two together, perhaps, you could maybe get 350 to 400,000 buys, which could also help to meet Mikey Garcia's financial demands. This more or less may be the hierarchy of thought
Why he's saying what he's saying.
when it comes to Bob Arum's comments and why he's open to making one fight but not the other. Because if you tried to stage Josh Taylor versus Mikey Garcia, you may not get nothing out of that because the Americans are only familiar with one fighter in a fight.
And that's Mikey.
But if you got two fighters that the Americans are familiar with, okay, now you're cooking with rice. The ignorance of the American boxing fan is not to be understated. Least of all when you're asking the American boxing fan to shell out $75 or $79 to watch a fight. You gotta realize that Josh Taylor, good a fighter as he might be, unified champion that he is today, these accolades, these accomplishments mean zero to the ignorant masses that know nothing about him.
And don't want to.
You know, if it's in the United Kingdom, you get a more educated boxing fan that can appreciate a fighter for who the fighter is, regardless of which flag he flies. But that's not the case here in the States. So a guy like Josh, he's not gonna get a lot of burn until he proves something here before the eyes of the boxing public here. Then maybe you got a shot. Whereas with Terrence, Terrence is already one half of a very hot topic here in the States, and that's the Errol Spence conversation. There are plenty of Americans that are ready, willing, and able to pay cash money to see him fight that guy. But if they can't see him fight that guy, you could substitute him with a Mikey Garcia because at minimum, it would allow you to cross-compare and gauge the performances. They may purchase the fight with the hope that Terrence Crawford stops Mikey Garcia where Errol Spence could not. That would be a big part of the selling point. And you know, with Mikey's bringing in the Mexican-American fans. They move the needle, you understand. There's a reason that Garcia versus Spence sold more pay-per-view buys than Porter versus Spence, even though Porter versus Spence was a way better fight. A more even matchup between two reigning world champions in the same division. In an ideal world, that would have been the fight that garnered more pay-per-view buys, but that wasn't the case. The case was Garcia versus Spence brought in more buys because Mikey Garcia brought in the Mexican-American fans. And this is how you can explain why Bob Arum takes one stance when it's about Josh, then takes another when it's about Terrence, when it's about Bud. It's a different situation entirely depending on which fighter you're matching against Mikey Garcia in the American pay-per-view market. Although in truth, this fight, the idea of it, has a fundamental dilemma, and it is that regardless of what Mikey's saying, I don't think for a second he's committed to making a fight with the likes of a Terrence Crawford, even on pay-per-view here in America. Mikey Garcia's name is already tied to the name of Manny Pacquiao, a fight that most every single welterweight is climbing over each other to get. So why would Mikey Garcia deprioritize Manny when he's on the cusp of getting him for Terrence? He's gonna make more money with Manny than he will with Bud. Frankly, I don't think that Top Rank is willing to offer up the kind of financial incentive it would take to get Mikey Garcia to deprioritize Manny for Crawford. I don't think they're gonna be willing to put up the kind of money that he's looking for because, like I said in my previous video, this is a guy who pulled in a $7 million payday for fighting the likes of a Jesse Vargas.
Yeah.
So what do you think he's going to be asking for to fight a Terrence Crawford? What do you think he's going to want? What kind of money do you think it's going to take?
More than they're willing to pay.
Their best bet at getting Terrence Crawford in there with somebody interesting would have to be Kell Brook. It's the only way. And you can't bill that fight as a pay-per-view here stateside because the same thing that applies to Josh applies to Kell. The only people that know Kell Brook are the people that watched him get his ass beat by Gennady Golovkin and Errol Spence. And these are not people that are willing to pay $75 or $79 for a pay-per-view involving him and Terrence Crawford. The only way that pay-per-view sells is if it's in the United Kingdom at a completely different price point at a venue in Sheffield, where not only will you sell tickets, but you'll sell pay-per-views. That's the only way it works out. They need to shift their focus over to Kell Brook, which is a more feasible option, because I don't see Mikey Garcia taking his fight. I don't. You also got to look at this from Kell Brook's perspective and what makes him a feasible option, all right? Kell Brook's been chasing around Amir Khan for years now, and that fight hasn't happened yet, and in all likelihood, it never will. It has not materialized, and in all likelihood, it won't materialize. So you don't have that avenue of opportunity for a payday at 147 or 154. At 154, where you been, there are no superstars. There are no big names. The guys holding belts. You're not going to sell a pay-per-view with any of those guys. Patrick Teixeira, Jermel Charlo, Jason Rosario. You're not going to sell nothing fighting those guys, all right? Now, if you go up the middleweight where the names are a little bit more familiar, you're going to get killed. You're going to get killed. We saw what happened to you when you went up there with Gennady Golovkin. You don't belong up there. So your best bet at a sizable payday in what could be a significant fight is a climb downstairs to the welterweight division against Terrence Crawford. That's your best bet. Look, I'm not telling you that this is the greatest fight in the world. I'm not telling you that. I'm just telling you that given the circumstances, the fact that the PBC kids are continuing to freeze Terrence Crawford out, Derek James is talking about pay-per-view buys and why the fight with Spence and Crawford shouldn't happen. Okay, Mikey Garcia is saying this and that, but he's doing something else. Your best bet at a significant fight that might actually get some attention is a Kell Brook fight. That would still lend itself to building the Errol Spence Jr. fight. It could, cross-comparing opponents and performances. That's because Kell doesn't have as many options as Mikey, so they should likely go with him.